How's everybody doing today? I'm very excited to be here and tell you about my favorite thing, which is interface design. My name is Fraylen. I've been in graphic design for over 10 years, and I've specialized in user interfaces and user experience design. And I also happen to love Final Fantasy XIV, and its capability to customize your interface is, I believe, unparalleled in the gaming world. And so I've tinkered with it for many, many years. And I've often found myself helping friends and people with their interfaces and bindings. And so now I thought I'd bring my musings and ideas to more people. So I hope that you find it interesting or at least entertaining. And remember, everything I say is just my opinion, but I hope maybe that you consider it. So, what is the impact of a good user interface? Well, we can see here is a heat map of kind of a default, what I would consider typical of a user interface. We got the hotbars along the bottom. We've littered a bunch of emotes off to the side. And everything's kind of in the same standard place. We have the targeting bar up top. We have the party list on the left. But if we kind of take a look at a more optimized user interface, we can see we've brought everything down to the middle of the bottom of the screen. You can see that the heat of my vision that I'm tracking with an eye tracking software is actually showing hotter spots. So I'm able to look at somewhere longer and dart because I'm able to move from one spot to the other more efficiently. When you compare both of these, you can kind of notice these things. So you see how the lines of the dots move from checking my global cooldown, checking myself, checking my dots, checking health, and moving your eye around like this a lot can kind of introduce potential eye strain. Also, if you're clicking and you have all your abilities, kind of just haphazardly placed on your bar, you could have uncertainty of action, you could lose your mouse. And then also, all the emotes along the right side, they might obscure maybe a boss that has moved over onto the side. And whereas in the more optimized user interface, you can see we're forming this triangular pattern with our vision that's centered around our player character, and therefore able to always be aware of AoEs and incoming attacks. It reduces eye movement, our abilities are logically kind of clustered, and we have an unobscured view of the horizontal space. And so, how do we get to this point? Well, we need to attune with your wool, and the only way you're going to do that is by attuning with these three aspects of your character and their interface. We got your HUD, your key bindings, and your input. Now, these three things I'm going to be talking about kind of interchangeably, but we're going to start with HUD, and then key bindings and input are kind of going to be together. So, we're going to talk about how they're connected. So first, your interface and you. So these are some things to consider when you're crafting your high-quality interface. So the number one thing that you need to know is the HUD layout tool is the best thing ever. You're going to find it right there under your system menu, and it's going to pop up with this. And this has 4 presets for different layouts. You might want different presets for different types of jobs, such as the tank job with the party list kind of on the far left, and you have your enemy list closer, or vice versa if you're a healer and more concerned about the party. If you press this little tiny cogwheel right here, you'll get to the customization for each individual element. And this tiny little button right here will actually toggle whether the element is shown at all. And this right here, this slider, is actually for the transparency because the label's on the right side for some reason. Okay, you know what? This menu is kind of a hot mess. Honestly, this is how I would redesign it if it was me. You just put all the labels on the left side, you put all the stuff on the right side. Honestly, Square, take some notes. But other than that, some important menus from the HUD layout mode that you'd want to change a little bit is the target info and the status info. Both of these can be broken out into multiple smaller elements, which can then be manipulated and arranged in better ways so that you can get better visibility on certain things. Next we have something else I want to mention. It's in a different menu. It's got your character configuration. If you set the tooltip help position to fixed rather than next to your cursor, then you're going to get, I think, a little bit better of an experience, especially if you're more of a person who clicks on your abilities, because then the tooltips won't get in the way of both items that you're hovering over and also various abilities. And if you don't enable the fix mode, these won't actually even show up in the HUD layout mode. Next, we need to talk about how size matters. Well, specifically screen size matters. Not only do we have to deal with size, but we have to deal with ratios. And not only ratios, but resolutions. And so when you're building your UI, you need to build it to suit your screen. You need to consider how large each element needs to be, and you want to cluster elements that you use most often together to reduce eye strain and other things that I mentioned before. And you can do this kind of easily if you're just starting out by adjusting the high resolution UI settings within system configuration and the default UI size adjustments. The first one will actually scale up everything, including like the menus and whatnot, whereas the second one will scale up the individual components themselves. And this is good if you just want to like make all the UI larger, but keep like your character sheet and stuff the regular same size. It's particularly good for people who are hard of sight. Next, we're going to talk about hotbars. So there's two different kinds of ways you can adjust or arrange your hotbar. You got the central alignment, and you got kind of an aside alignment. Now, which of these is better? You know, it's kind of a personal choice, but you know, if you're going on a center alignment, the hotbar is kind of your focus. It's helpful if you're like learning the skills. Whereas the second one is kind of focusing more on enhancement timers, settings, or enhancement and status timers, excuse me. And it allows kind of better visibility of the floor of your character right below them. And particularly, the central alignment kind of covers up your character, whereas the side alignment keeps your character visible, which I like. One second, just add some water. So then let's talk about hotbar grouping. So why would you make your hotbar like this with little 3x4s as opposed to 12x1s? What's the reason behind one or the other? Well, that's because hotbar number 1 is special. Hotbar number 1 is always replaced when you get some kind of special action, such as a mount or a fashion accessory, or if you're playing as a different type of character, or you've been transformed. And so you need to consider where you're using hotbar 1 and what keybinds are actually associated with it, so that when you use it, it's, you know, usable. And specifically that as well, hotbar sharing will manipulate what kinds of, or which hotbars are being shared between jobs. So you wouldn't want to make hotbar 1 like a universal bar that's shared between all your stuff, because maybe then you aren't binding that to something. So like right here I have the first 3 hotbars as being shared between all the jobs I play, and then 4 through 10 are all universal bars. And that's particularly helpful for universal actions such as targeting or sprint or limit break or duty actions, things that you're going to always want. Some other hotbar settings that are kind of handy to take a look at is you can change like the where the recast timer is positioned. You can hide your unassigned slots. You can disable hotbar numbers and hotbar cycling. Basically, you take your hotbars from looking like this to looking like this. So just getting rid of all those numbers on the side. And next, we need to talk about hardware. And That's because everyone has hands, but everyone has different hands. So, what are we going to use to play the game? We're going to use mouse keyboard. We're going to use maybe an MMO mouse and keyboard. We're going to use a keypad, or we're going to use a controller. And when it comes to controller, Square Enix has actually done like a pretty good job. Like, props to them. Like, I don't really have comments about the controller experience other than activating your wing cross hotbars. That's like all you really need to do to play on a controller effectively. Of course, there's other elements of, organizing your HUD, like I've discussed, which will help you keep an eye on stuff. I see a lot of people like put their minimap like right between the cross hotbars or their job gauges. Those are all really effective. But yeah, these are pretty much the 4 ways that you could possibly interface with Final Fantasy XIV. I mean, unless your name is SuperLewis64 and you play the game with like a replica sword or boxing gloves or a pizza, but we can't all be as cool as he is. So we're going to have to use Overliable. And that's the keyboard. So by default, the keyboard is going to kind of put all your abilities like this across the top, and that's really hard to play with. Your fingers cannot reach the other end and do WSD at the same time. So the game will add Control as a modifier to get to even more abilities, and then even Shift to get it to even more abilities. And it's just, unless you're a concert pianist, you're not really going to be able to play this effectively. And so what we're going to do is we're going to actually utilize the space around your WSD more efficiently and put the abilities something like this. You have 44 keys that are easily reachable and 36 if you don't have a function row. And if we take advantage of our mouse, then we can actually put the shift modifier on the mouse. And a lot of people think that this is probably the most comfortable. You can do quick things like Shift Z, but when you start trying to hit like Shift tilde or Shift, B, then it starts to be difficult. So it's nice to have it on the mouse. It also kind of spreads out the flexing, because I have like a repetitive stress injury in my hands from gaming too hard. And so I was using Shift a lot, and that can strain your ligaments on that side. And so if you put your repetitive action, which is holding Shift to hit abilities, on a different hand, and then you play with the other hand, then that can kind of reduce impact on your tendons. And then we can also put targeting and stuff on the mouse. So how are we going to actually display this in the game in a way that makes sense? Because if you just had hotbars in a line, doesn't really match. So we have to come up with a new layout, something like this. I've put these arrows here to kind of indicate where WASD is. You don't have to keep them there, of course, once you finally get like used to how this is laid out, but we're just trying to match them as much as possible. And we're just splitting it with only a single modifier instead of having 2 modifiers, which makes the whole process of, figuring out where your buttons are a lot easier. And this is kind of tricky to set up like this, especially because I'm using a 3x4 layout. And again, that's because hotbar 1 is special, and you want to be able to access the very end of that hotbar easily, which is going to end up on C right here. And so the way you set this up is kind of like 1, 2, 3, and then you got to go down to Q, and then you're going to actually continue 4 once you get over to hotbar 2, and so forth. And so then once you have this kind of laid out, what does that look like on a whole HUD? Something like this. And I've taken away the arrows here. And then here's all the other elements kind of arranged. And you can see down the center here we have enhancements, and we have the cast bar for the enemy, very important things, so you can watch your timers, enemy health at the bottom, and the 3 purple blocks and whatnot above the main hotbars, those are just extra hotbars for like emotes and stuff, but we want to have those toggleable on some kind of hotkey so that they're not always in our face. So then next, let's talk about the MMO mouse. It's a creation of childlike ingenuity. Someone just said a mouse and a keyboard, let's slap them together. Why not? And I think that they're really quite effective for people who have like smaller hands. You know, for me, I got big dumb fingers. I can't quite press those buttons very well, but it works out for a lot of people. And so I've thought about, you know, what is kind of the best layout for an MMO mouse. You know, it's going to be clustered like this. It's my old favorite, the 3x4 layout for each hotbar. And we're just using the numpad here to kind of attach the different key bindings to them. But you can also see on the right side, I've attached the keyboard cluster as kind of this shared bar. So those are on the, you know, hotbars that are shared between all jobs. And therefore we can put things like targeting and sprint and duty actions and stuff like that on that bar, and it's matched with the keyboard. So you got your one hand for all your abilities on the right, and then you have all this kind of like targeting and whatnot on the left. So it kind of splits the difference there. And this is kind of how you'd lay it out. And then here's what it would be in a layout. And all my layouts here are 1920 by 1080 just for the purposes of the stream, but I actually have an ultra-wide monitor myself. But everybody's screen size is different, so they might be moved around a little bit more. And then here's all the HUD layout elements. And yes, I favor the aside style, but it could be easily moved to the center. And so then next, very exciting, the moment that I've been waiting for, to tell you about my favorite thing in the world. Let me introduce it properly. The Logitech G13. It is got 24 programmable buttons, a smooth joystick, an LCD screen for easy profile squidging, an ergonomic palm rest, and good old Logitech software that isn't G-Hub. I highly recommend this excellent peripheral, but it happens to be discontinued, so you're really only going to find it on eBay or other secondhand stores. It's often found between $60 and $100. And I wouldn't pay over that for it because it's an old product and there are like plenty of different people selling them. So definitely find yourself a good one. There's some people who mod the thumbstick. I have a modded thumbstick one that I paid a little extra for. But the thumbstick is like this little knob, and it's actually pretty comfortable by itself. I just wanted to try something different. I've encouraged like a lot of my friends to purchase this thing, and none of them have regretted it. Everybody seems to always really attach themselves to it. So, but you know, it's a membrane kind of key thing, and kind of hard to find sometimes. So, like, what if you can't find one, or you kind of want something different? Well, you know, there are some other options. Number one, you know, you could actually get this Tactical Assault Commander F14 that's, you know, an officially licensed product, and it's, you know, got this adjustable thumbstick, and, you know, software seems decent. I haven't tried it myself because, you know, it's kind of expensive. It's $140. So, you know, you spend 60 to 100 on a G13, you know, it's used, but I kind of can vouch for it. Or maybe you get something like this and you can just buy it on Amazon. But if you want something that's like more gamer lights, then you can get Razer Tartarus V2. You know, it has kind of more mechanical type keys, some different options. It does have this like weird D-pad joysticky thing, and I don't really know how to feel about it. it feels like a lie, you know? There's just something so nice about the ball, actual like rolling wheel ball. I don't know how to describe it. An actual joystick that has 360 degrees of movement, whereas this is like a D-pad masquerading as a joystick, and you can just like pop this little cap off, and it becomes a D-pad. You know, I know people who have this thing, and they like it. You know, I think it's totally fine, but I don't know. Once I've tried the G13, I just can't go back. So, but yeah, this thing is also pretty pricey. You know, it's under $30. You can kind of get it refurbished sometimes. There's different key type variants that are also around $60 to $70 refurbished. It also comes in white if that's your jam. But let's talk about binding a keypad. We're again just going to try to fall back on our trusty visual binding method, making our input look as close to our output as possible. And Final Fantasy gives us the flexibility to do that, which is just so cool. So you can see here I have a very similarly shaped arrangement. And then you add shift with it, with your mouse, and you get access to a whole other set. And this is kind of how it's laid out. And, you know, the keys I've chosen here, you know, Q, E, R, those are matched on the keyboard in a way that, like, if the peripheral fails, you can fall back and actually use the keyboard instead, which has happened occasionally. And here's kind of what my HUD looks like. Except for I usually play in an ultra-wide, so it's a bit more spread out. But yeah, pretty big monitor, so I got lots of room for all the different stuff. But I got my party list close, I got all the enhancements and timers in the center. But yeah, let's talk about some other helpful settings that you might be interested in. So, the number one thing that I think is just the most important, in my opinion, is the camera mode. Between standard and legacy type, there's just such a difference in like your own personal performance that can be had, and the fact that standard type is the default is just a shame. So we can kind of see the two differences if you've never kind of toggled it before. Is standard on the left, once you get threatened by an AoE and you want to back up, you kind of just casually backpedal. Whereas on the right, you know, you turn 360 degrees and you start fucking booking it. Excuse my language. And it's just more effective in general. So I highly recommend that people switch to this. And it's not just me, it's most people use this layout anyway. It's just there's like 30%-ish that don't. And I think that the only reason that 30%-ish don't is because they've never opened the settings menu and actually clicked to see if there was a different option. So it's kind of also skewed with these percentages because, you know, it's controller that is part of that standard type as well. But, you know, I still think that that percentage would be different if people were given legacy type by default. And these statistics came from Square Enix at a recent panel at PAX West that I attended. It was very exciting. I jumped out of my chair when I saw these on the screen. The other thing that I think is also kind of a quality of life and improvement setting that a lot of people don't seem to do is just the nameplates flying around. So, you know, you walk through the city, like, what would you prefer, the one on the left or the one on the right? Most people are on the right because they didn't know that they could actually come into settings and adjust that. But you're saying to yourself, well, I want to know what people's names are. You know, like, what if I want to see some names? Well, we can fix that pretty quickly. We can just make a macro that can display nameplates on and off. You create two little buttons on a hotbar, toggles the names on and off. And then some other kind of nameplate settings that I think are nice to have. So for other players, you can just I have mine as generally as always when targeted. And then I've also changed their color palette to be gray, and it just kind of like fades in a little bit more than the blue, which is kind of strong. I also hide titles. I'm sorry, you Perfect Legends, Ultimate Perfect Legends out there. Your titles are cool. I just prefer serenity and not having to see like a bajillion names and letters all flying across my screen all the time. So I hide them. But you're still very good. I see the weapons, I can't not look at those. So you do that in other PCs settings, and don't forget to go into NPCs and actually turn minions to when targeted as well, because that you'll still see them flying around and their names are attached to them, and it's kind of obnoxious. Other nameplate settings really quick, take a look at these. So, you don't need to see your own name. You can just have that be when targeted. You don't really need to see the surnames of like your party members, because sometimes people have long surnames. And, they're your party members or your friends. You kind of already know who they are. So what's the point of that redundant information? And then in the general tab, there's this setting to like show their job next to their name, which is handy when you're like in a duty and seeing which color of ally is which position. There's two little settings there, one for with a color and one without. And then now let's talk about targeting. Targeting is really important in this game, obviously, targeting-based MMO. But we can make that easier. We can make it kind of not feel like a tab targeting MMO by enabling auto-targeting. I'm pretty sure this isn't on by default. I was going to double check, but I ran out of time. But you want to make sure that it's enabled, because it's just really great. As a caster, you hit your button and it grabs a target. You're as a melee, grabs a target. So a lot less finicky, I find. And the little drop down right there next to it for line of sight, you can change that to closest. And that's much better. I see someone says it's not enabled by default. So yeah, pretty sure. I was pretty sure. And it's just great. I should definitely enable that. And then there's some other targeting options here under mouse. And you can attach different things to your scroll wheel, which is pretty cool. And it's kind of what I use to go up and down the enemy list, rather than hitting tab target over and over to go through a list. I find it to be more natural than like doing tab and then shift tab to go back down the list if you need to. You can just hold a modifier like shift and then roll your scroll wheel up or down and go up and down the list. So if you go too far, you can scroll back. And it also works for parties, so you can actually scroll through your party list. So it's good for healers too. And then here's some more targeting options that are, I think, important for people to know, and specifically for different types of players, healers, DPS, tanks. Take a look in your keybind menu under targeting. You got target the target of your current target, assist target, the longest name in the whole menu that I'm pretty sure scaled the rest of the UI around that one item. But target assist is really great for healers, because it allows you to toggle between the tank and their target. It's just much better than having to go back and forth between clicking on the party list and clicking on the enemy, or clicking on the party list and clicking tab, not getting the right enemy. It gives you a lot of peace of mind to be able to just click that button and then throw a heal and then click the button again to go back to attacking. Your uptime will thank you. And then for DPS, you could use tab target and target cycle, which is what it is by default. But if you actually use target enemy, or target nearest enemy, it will give you the nearest enemy, which I find is particularly handy for if I'm setting up a positional on a group of enemies. Maybe there's 2 left, so you should be using single target on 2, AoE over 3, or 3 and above. And so if you're like trying to get a positional and you want the one that's right next to you instead of having to futz with tab targeting, then you can just get the closest one. It's also super effective in PvP because when you're running around in the front line, you just want to get the person who is absolutely the closest to you and hit them with something before you get inevitably dogpiled. And it's super effective with casters. Pictomancer, best PvP job, by the way. And I just hit people with paint and run away, and I get the most battle high. So yeah, target close is just so good. And then focus target. Focus target for tanks. You can put it on your off tank. You can put it on your healer. Just keeps an eye on particular targets. You can put it on the boss too if there's many other enemies around, or if you just want to be able to quickly get back to the boss. If you're a DPS, maybe you could use focus target to keep the boss focus targeted, and then you can go do mechanics and kill various additional enemies, quickly get back to the boss. I know it's probably pretty easily accomplished with just hitting tab a couple times, but it gives you that surety of action so that you can hit that button. And then you can also actually, rather than binding these specifically to a button, you can make them into hotbar buttons by writing macros like these, and put them on your hotbar. And then one more thing here, managing battle effects. You're going to be effective if you can see. It's kind of important. So there's this setting under characters, configuration, which is for battle effects, and you can toggle these manually, or you could write a macro. And these are kind of the 3 macros for adjusting your party battle effects, and I just put them on little gems. And you can just click those really quick when you go into a duty. You can configure that, so that when you jump into like a 4-man duty, I like to see like all the battle effects. I don't want to see everything when I'm in an 8-man duty, or especially PvP, because then it's just insanity. You can't see anything. So, with everything I've just said, I'm coming in at a tight 30 minutes, and I think that now you're all pretty prepared to flex with your user interface, and then also your key bindings, and also your input. So, with that, I'll say thank you, and are there any questions? I'm also watching the Twitch chat and the chat in-game. Oh, and one more thing before a question comes in, I forgot to mention. I'm not a YouTuber, I'm not a Twitch streamer, I'm not looking to be famous, really, but I just want to help people. So I have a YouTube account. It's Fraylen's FFXIV. If you want to subscribe there, I have a couple how-to videos and configuration files that you can download and install on your computer, and just kind of get a jump start on everything I've talked about here. And I also have a Twitter if you want to follow me there. Sometimes I, talk about other games too, but I like Final Fantasy a lot, so I'll talk about that, and I'll post any new configuration files that I put up publicly to there, as well as my YouTube channel. So please follow me there if you're interested in any of this. Yep, and some of my friends are in the audience, so they're being very nice. Do I have a macro for the nameplates? Yes. I can scroll right back up, actually. Maybe you missed it. So the nameplate macro is like this. So it's nameplate disp, and then other, and that's for like other player characters. That's why it says other. You can just take a look in the macro menu. There's like a little thing that shows you kind of what all the commands are, and you can kind of look through and see how they work. But this one will toggle them on and off. So other 3 for off, other 1 for on. Let's see, catch up on these messages here. I've been wondering... Will there be a VOD of this panel? I don't know if EtherCon is recording these or saving the VODs. I'm recording it, and I'll put it up on my YouTube channel. So if you want to show it to anybody, I'll have it up there. What would say the most important thing to be mindful when organizing your hotbars? If you're talking about organizing your hotbars, like the abilities themselves, I would say the most important thing is kind of making sure that you have like anti-knockback really available, and also just kind of clustering your rotation in a way that is easy to play for your hands, because you really just don't want to be stretching too far, and trust me on that one. You want to make sure that it feels like you're playing a beautiful piano and it's just very flowing. So making sure all your like AoE rotations are near each other, making sure your single targets are near each other, utilities, mitigations, all that kind of stuff. If you're raiding, some people put big hotbars like in the middle of the screen that show a particular ability, and that way you can watch its cooldown. I think that's pretty effective. What's the difference between effect all and effect simple? Yeah, effect all will show all battle effects, and simple is kind of a reduced version. So there's instances where the battle effects leave something on the ground, like a white mage's holy sacred soil, or no, that's scholar, sacred soil. And those you would see, because those are kind of important. They reduce damage that you're standing in them. So in simple mode, you're gonna see those kinds of things. I think generally you don't want to probably ever have the effects completely off, because those kinds of things are helpful. All right, well, let's see. I'm going to look at the questions over here. Thank you, Anna. Can I also share one? It's automatic for battle. Sharing what exactly? Is that a macro that you're talking about there? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and share it. Yeah, I'll shout it out for battle effects. Probably turn my presentation off and back to the people who are here. Thanks everybody for coming. Can you adjust battle effects with macro? Yeah, you totally can. Oh, okay, so Twitch chat has this macro error off, battle effects self. Yep. Yeah, so they're sharing a bunch of different macros here. Yeah, oh, yeah, another good one, pet size. I should have mentioned that one. So summoners have summons that can be very large sometimes. Titan's butt gets in the way, then you can't see. You can do pet size / pet size all small to make all the summoners summons be small. And that's just for you, of course. You know, everyone else is still going to see their summons at whatever size they want to see them at. But if Titan's getting in the way, then that's a great one. There's a lot of really great macros. I did not have enough time to make this presentation. I had a lot of stuff going on, unexpected life things, so it happens. But I'd like to do another presentation at some point that kind of refines this and adds more macros and talks about some other stuff. But I did have an hour for this slot, so we can kind of just hang out for a little bit. We can just keep answering questions. We've all been mooned by Titan, absolutely. What's a good way to quickly switch between targets in PvP? Yeah, when lots of enemies are bunching together. You know, I've been trying to figure that out myself. You know, cycle target is okay, but you're really not going to get a specific target if you're trying to like get someone that's like just behind someone else. You know, your focus or your target closest is going to be kind of your best friend, and just maneuvering yourself into the position where you could hit that person. I use the mouse to just click on people if I'm trying to get like a astrologian that someone is being, dogpiled on, something like that. But yeah, there's no way other really than target cycle. I would say shift scroll wheel, like using the scroll wheel to target, is a lot faster and a lot easier to target PvP enemies, because it's like you're trying to get to that astrologian to target them, and you're hitting your target cycle button, and unless you're really quick with like your shift reverse target cycle button, then they're probably going to be dead already and you won't get that battle high. So just having shift scroll wheel and going scroll up, scroll down, you kind of miss them, you can overcorrect and get back on it. Do I have recommendation layouts for each job or even roles? Yeah, for roles, I kind of touched on this earlier. It's all about reducing your kind of like eye strain. So if you have your gauges really close, if you have your party list really close, it all depends on let me just take a look at this heat map again. Kind of blaze past this. This is super cool. I use the Tobii Eye Tracker 5 to kind of record these and just played some stuff. And so here on the kind of good quote-unquote user interface, you can kind of see the heat map where I'm like looking. I'm really not even like looking at my abilities. I'm just watching the GCD timer roll because I kind of feel where the buttons are on my G13. And then I'm just glancing at the tank a lot to make sure that they're not taking any big whammies, and then myself. Whereas if you look at kind of this, I'm glancing all the way up to kind of like check the boss health and if I put my dot on or not. I'm glancing briefly over to the health of the tank, and you can see there's like a lot more kind of like blue and movement around on the hotbar as I'm trying to like search for the ability. And part of that is because I'm not as experienced playing with like a layout like this, so I know people who use the 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way to 0 as their input, and they're actually really good, and they just somehow feel their way across the keyboard like some kind of Rain Man, and I can't do it. I think that it's too steep of a hill for people to climb when they try and play this game that's like not very welcoming at first as far as interfaces go. So I like to give people every advantage to enjoy this game, and I think my contribution to that is just making sure that the interface and the controls are going to be the most simple as possible. So yeah, for DPS, it's kind of, you want your gauges center. For tanks, you want the enmity list to be large and close to the middle so that you can see whether those lights are red or green. And then for healers, you want the party list really close. Let's see. Quickly. Yeah, all right. Well, I don't see any other questions. Thanks everybody so much. I think I'm going to call it there. You can, of course, send me a message on Twitter. You can follow me on YouTube. Those are not the right verbs for those. I'm on Cactar. I'm Fraylen Solidoran if you want to find me in game. And yeah, thanks so much. I hope the rest of you guys have a great EtherCon. All right, bye-bye.